Okay, so this is Prep Test 50 Game 2. So we have a member of a 5-person committee will be selected among 3 parents. We have F, G, and H, 3 students, K, L, and M, and 4 teachers, which is U, W, X, and Z. The selection of the committee will meet the following conditions. So we have our variables up here, and we know that we have to have 5 and exactly 5. So I'm going to start making my diagram, maybe. So I'm going to put 5 spots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to start here. Okay, so rule number 1 says the committee must include exactly 1 student. So because we can only have 1 student, I'm going to give a spot to number 1 as 1 student. I cannot have 2 students. I cannot have 3 students. So that means the rest of my diagram is going to be full of parents and teachers. We're only going to have 1 student. Moving on to rule number 2, it says F and H cannot both be selected. So if I know that F and H are both parents, that means that they cannot both be selected. So I can't have 3 parents, right? I can't include all 3 because then I would be including F and H. However, I could have 2 parents maximum. I could have F and G, G and H. Yeah, those are pretty much the 2 combinations. So I could have a maximum of 2 parents, or I could have a minimum of just 1 parent with just F, just G, just H. So I have 2 options for the number of parents that I can have. Because I have 2 options, I'm going to make that happen, and I'm going to label it under my spots, just like I did with S. So we have one world in which we have 2 parents, and one world in which we have 1 parent. Now, focusing on that kind of math that we're doing here, if I can just have 1 parent and 1 student, that completely eliminates the rest of these variables, basically. So the rest of my game board has to be filled up with teachers. So in a world where I have 1 parent and 1 student, I'm going to have 3 teachers. And to fill up the rest of my board over here, I'm only going to have 2 teachers because I can't exceed 3 parents and I can't exceed 1 student. So this is basically the board that we're going to use, and this is the only option. So we're going to go back into our rule, and we're going to look at that rule again. It says F and H cannot both be selected. So if I can't have F and H together, I could have F and G, and I could have G and H as my 2 parents. So because, again, those are only the 2 options, I'm going to split this up and make that happen so I have it more concrete. So student, parent, parent, teacher, teacher. So in one world, I'm going to have F and G, and in the other world, I'm going to have G and H. There's no other options for that. In my second world, however, where I only have 1 parent, that could be a number of possibilities. I can have any one of those 3 at this point right now. So I'm just going to kind of notate to myself F, G, or H can go in P. If you want to split it up, you totally can. Might be helpful. So now that I basically have all my parents placed, I really don't have to worry about my parents anymore, which is really great, at least placing them. So now that I've gone through all of my worlds, I can move on to my next rule, which says M and Z cannot both be selected. Okay, so my M is a student, my Z is a teacher. Well, given that I only have 1 spot for a student, we can kind of go about this kind of similar to how we did our F and G and our G and H rule. So if I have 1 student that's in my group 1, it can either be M, or it can be a variation of the another K or L, basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to split world number 1 into another world. SPTT. So I'm going to say I either have M or I don't have M. And I would either have K or L. But the rule basically applies when I do have M, because M cannot be with Z. So when I have M, I can't have Z in any of these remaining spots over here. It's impossible. But when I don't have M, I don't really care, because it's only when M and Z are both selected that I really care about. So I could have Z here and I'll still be fine with my rule because M is also not selected. So we're basically going to go through our rules, our worlds, and we're going to do what we just did. So from world number 2, right here, we're going to split it up again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have student, parent, teacher, 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 and we have F, G, H. So we're going to have one in which we do have M and another in which we do not have M. Now, when we do have M, that means that we can't have Z. So I'm basically hiding Z from my view right now. So because I have 3 empty spots for my teachers, and when I don't have Z, I only have 3 teachers to work with, these automatically have to be full, or fill in my spots, basically. What did I just do? Yeah, okay. So that might change. One of the worlds or one of the rules might eliminate this diagram, but as of right now, if I have M there, I have 1 parent, these 3 have to be in there. Going into this world, number 5, do I really care what happens when I don't have M? No, because I could still have Z in here, and because M is also not selected, it's not going to violate any of our rules. So we did 1, 2, and we had 4 and 5 split from that. So then we're going to go into world number 3. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to have a world in which we do have M and a world in which we do not have M. So we're going to make this our M, and we're going to make this our not M. When we don't have M, again, we don't care because the rule only happens when we have both M and Z. I can have Z and not M and be fine. But going into world number 3, when I don't have Z, it's again very similar to our number 1. We can have any variation of the 3 that are left over. So that's attacking that rule. So it's a lot. But basically what we're doing is we're looking, okay, what are the 2 options? We have M or we don't have M. And what happens when we do have M and what happens when we don't have M. All right, going into our 4th rule, which says U and W cannot both be selected. Well, we're going to go through our worlds and we're going to apply that rule. So in world number 1, where I don't have Z, so I don't have Z, and U and W cannot both be selected, what are my options? Well, I'm either going to have W and X or U and X. That's my only 2 options. You can break it down because it's very similar to how we did F and G and H. Or what you could also do is you could notate you're going to have X regardless, and you're either going to have U or M. So just for purposes of like splitting up the worlds, I'm going to break it down again so you can actually see what I'm talking about. But if the slashing up here is enough for you, then that's perfectly fine. So we have F, G, X, S, P, P, T, T. So we're going to make one in which we do have U and one in which we have W. So we're going to do U here. We're going to do W there. And now I've got those worlds done, but it's not my last rule yet, so I'm going to kind of keep them for right now and make sure that I'm still going over them just to make sure it's in accordance with the other 2 rules that I have. Moving into world number 2, I cannot have U and W both together, so that means that we're going to actually cross this world out because, again, it cannot stand. I have to have U and W in this world. Moving into my 5th world, if I cannot have U and W together, but I have to have 3 spots open, that means I'm going to have X and Z, and then either U or W. I'm gonna have to pick one of them. So I'm gonna actually fill that in here. And now we have our world in which we're gonna have to pick U and we're gonna have to pick W. So we're gonna leave it like that for now because I think that's pretty, I mean, we can break that up if we wanted to, like we did with 1 and 7, but for right now I'm gonna leave it. Going into 3, kind of very similar to what we just did in number 1, we know that we cannot have Z, and we can't have U and W both be there, so we are gonna have to have X fill in one of these. We can't have U and W fill in that spot. So we're gonna have either U or W in this spot. And we'll leave that as it is right now. Okay, moving forward to my 4th world. So this is where it's going to get a little bit tricky because we don't have to worry about Z because we're not having M in this world. So all of my 4 variables as T's are still players in this game, basically. So we can't have U and W both be selected. So we're either going to have one or the other or none. So we're going to actually split this. And we're going to have one in which we do have one of our U and W's and one in which we don't have our U and W, which would force X and Z to be here. Now, when we do have our U and W, that means that we're going to have to pick from the our empty spot, we're going to have to pick the remaining 2. So we're either going to have X or we're going to have Z. It's a lot of either or in this game. And that's how you're going to apply that rule to that diagram. And then number 6 is very similar because, again, we only have 2 teacher spots and we don't have to worry about not having Z because we don't have M. So all 4 of my teachers are still players in this game, which means we're going to split it just like we just did. So in World 6, we're going to have one in which we have U or W. And in World 9, we're going to have the world be neither of them. And when we have neither, that means that we must have X and Z. And then in our U and W world, we're going to have to pick from X or Z to fill in that spot because we can't have both. So we got a lot of worlds going on right now, but we're probably going to eliminate some based off of our other rules, hopefully. My fingers crossed. Because I don't like having a lot of worlds. All right, so the second to last rule says F cannot be selected unless Z is also selected. So basically what this rule translates to is unless I have Z, I cannot have F. So if I see F, I better be seeing a Z on the other side of my diagram. So in world number 1, I have an F, but I can't have F unless I have Z, and I don't have Z over here. I'm not going to worry about flipping or switching one of them to have Z in them because I created this world with a purpose. It was in accordance with my rules. I don't really care how I got it. So I'm just going to automatically cross this out because I don't have Z there and I need F there. So it's invalid. Going into, I'm just going to go straight up and down now. So going into my 3rd world, do I have F? No. So I don't really care about the rest of the rule because I don't have F, so I don't really care. Going into 4, though, I have F, and I can't have F unless I have Z. So I don't see a Z over here, automatically eliminate. Going into our 4th world, which is our next open world, I have an F, better be seeing a Z. That forces me to automatically pick Z in this world. So instead of picking between X and Z, because I have my F, I have to pick Z here. Have to, in order for it to survive. If I didn't pick Z or if I replaced it with an X, it would fail. It would die. It doesn't fall in accordance with our rule. So now we're good there. Moving downward, I have an F, better see a Z. I have a Z, so I'm good. Now we're going over here into our 5th world. F is not necessarily placed, But I don't necessarily need to do anything because if I pick F, I have a Z. I'm good. If I pick a G, doesn't really matter. We don't necessarily have to have F if we have Z. So I'm pretty much good right now. I don't have to worry about it because it's not a necessity that I need F if I have Z. It's a necessity that I have Z when I have F. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if that doesn't. Going into my sixth world, don't have F, so I don't really care about the rule. And going into my ninth world, again, I don't have F. I don't really care about the rule anymore. Right, cool. We eliminated 2, I think, worlds, so that's great. Going into our next rule, it says W cannot be selected unless H is also selected. So again, this is very similar to our original or our last rule that we went over. If I have W, I better be seeing an H with it. I cannot have a W unless I have an H with it. So we're going to go down to our third rule, or our third world here. I could have a W. If I have a W, I have to have an H, and I do have an H. If I have a U, the rule doesn't apply. So I don't necessarily need to do anything with this world because either way, if I pick U or W, I'm in accordance with my rules. I'm good to go. So this rule world, given that it's our last rule and we've placed all of our variables, is completely done. That's our first valid world. Yay. Great. Moving on to the fourth world. I could pick W. If I pick W though, I have to have H, and I don't have H over here, which means I can't pick W, which automatically means that I have U in this spot. I have to have U in this spot. There's no other way around it. So that's our second full world. Going down to number 8, I don't have W selected, so I don't really care about the rule. And given that it's the last rule and we don't have any other variables to place in here, this is a completed world. I'm good there. Third world completed. Yay. All right. Moving on to world number 5, I could have a W or I could have a U. Now, because my F, G, and H are not concrete in my world, I could have either or. This is going to kind of dictate on what I do. If I have W, I'm going to have H. But if I have U, the rule doesn't apply, so I could still have any 3 of them. So because of that, because it's kind of forcing some of my other variables to be in place, I'm going to make a 10th world. One in which I have W here and U in the third position in my other world. So again, because of the rule, when I have W, I have to have H. So I have to pick my H here. But when I have U, again, doesn't really matter. The rule does not apply, meaning that this can stand by itself, how it is. So these 2 have become complete worlds now. Yay. Going into my 6th world, if I have a W, I could have a W. If I have a W though, I have to make sure that I have an H, and because H is concretely placed, I know that it'll follow that rule, so I'm good there. If I had a U, the rule doesn't apply, it doesn't matter. So again, either way, if I pick U or W, I'm good, I'm solid, it's gonna follow that rule. So again, I don't necessarily have to do anything to this world, I don't have to split it up. If you want to, you totally can. If you need help kind of visualizing that, I know I'm kind of talking about it and doing it in my head. If you need to visualize it, split it. But right now, because I can pick either one and it would still apply to the rule, I'm good to go. I don't need to split it anymore. Going to our 9th and final world, I don't have W, so I don't really care. Doesn't matter. So this one is a complete world as well. So we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 worlds in this game. These are the only possibilities that can happen. These 3 worlds right here are invalid. When I go into the answer choices, I can only go off of these 7 worlds. So hopefully that makes some sense. Let me know if it does not. This game was kind of a little tricky, a little bit hard, but very doable.